Hello, everyone. My name's Matthew Wilgress from Labour Friends of Progressive Latin America, and it's great to have you with us today and to introduce our guest for a special interview on the urgent and developing situation in Peru. We're glad to be joined today by Francesca Emanuele, who's a Peruvian activist, also a PhD student in Washington and a former correspondent of the Telesur media agency in Latin America. Thanks for being with us today, Francesca. Could you sum up the latest in Peru and what the developing situation represents?
Thank you for inviting me. So we are living a long-standing political crisis. We have had 6 different presidents in the past 4 years, and I don't think that anything is going to change if there are not profound transformations of our political system. And the working class, the indigenous people, are fed up of having politicians, racist politicians that are not doing anything to improve the life of the poorest communities. A year and a half ago, Pedro Castillo was elected. He was the first president of working class origins and supposedly a leftist president in the history of Peru. People had a lot of hope in him, and because he said that he was going to transform the country, that he was going to reduce inequalities. Now that president is not there anymore. He announced a coup just before an impeachment vote in Congress, and in less than 2 hours, he was arrested. He was actually impeached right after he announced the coup. And Congress celebrated, singing and chanting that he was ousted. This is an image that I have stuck in my head. These congressmen celebrating and saying that they were the heroes of democracy, when the truth is that Castillo was elected. When Castillo was elected, they tried to flip the results of the election. They said that there was that the election that gave the victory to Castillo was a fraudulent election, and despite the fact that there was no evidence that there was fraud, and they really tried. They pushed a lot. So finally, when Castillo was inaugurated, because as I said, there was no evidence, the European Union, the OAS, confirmed that there was no evidence of fraud. As soon as he was sworn in, they continue the right-wing politicians that actually have captured, in sense, the Congress, continue trying to oust him. And as you can see, they finally did it. Now we have a new president that almost nobody knows. She was the president of Pedro Castillo, but she has barely talked in the media. She is a president that is constitutional, let's say, but she's completely delegitimized. As soon as she was inaugurated, she met just with the right-wing people. The right-wing people was trying to oust Castillo from the beginning of the presidency, and she formed a technocrat cabinet. And instead of listening to the demands of the population that were already mobilizing in Peru, so she sent the military and the police to repress those protests. Now my country is under a state of emergency, and people have been killed. They have been repressed, brutally repressed, and who are protesting are not the elites. They are the middle class. People who are protesting are not the elites, and they are not the middle class. They are the working class and indigenous people. And they are people not in Lima. They are people in the rural areas. The ones who thought that Castillo was going to bring that transformation that would improve their conditions and their future. So they have risen, and they are demanding for new elections, new general elections, actually, that Congress should be shut down. And they are asking also for the liberation or the release of Castillo. And as well, they are requesting a new constitution, because the constitution we have, and this is important to take into account for this analysis, is a constitution that was passed during the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori, and I would say is the source of the origins of many of our problems. It has given an inflated power to Congress. That's why Congress can threaten in every presidency the president with this figure of impeachment, because it's quite easy to impeach a president, not because of the votes, but because they can really use any excuse to impeach the president. We also have a healthy political system of political parties. For example, one of the leftist figures in Peru, one of the most well-known leftist figures in Peru, who almost passed to the second round in 2016. Her name is Veronica Mendoza, and got 3 million votes. She doesn't have a political party, or a political party that has credentials to run in an election, because the requirements are so difficult that only business people or right-wing traditional politicians that have money are able to form a party that has credentials to go to the elections. So we are not living in a democracy in Peru, and that's why people are demonstrating on the streets, are protesting on the streets, and are demanding for this to change. We are actually in a rotten political system right now in Peru, and that's why we're seeing all these protests.
On the protests, people would have seen some limited media coverage, I think, but it would be good to get more of an idea of how big the protests are, what their nature is, some of their key demands, which you touched on there, and where that sort of protest movement is going.
Yeah, the protests were originated, or they started in the rural areas of Peru, and these are not protests that are organized by parties or by big social movements, or organized big social movements or organizations, I would say. These are more spontaneous. These are people who are, as I said, fed up with the situation, and they are indigenous and working class people. And they have been walking to the capital city to be requesting to be heard in the past few days. This is very important because they are not super organized. The military and the police are repressing them brutally, and there are no consequences. So the media is not reporting how they have been repressed. For example, I was looking at the press this morning in Peru, and yesterday 7 people were killed by the police in Ayacucho, the Andes, and this was not part of the headlines of the press. So that's extremely important, because during the year and a half of the presidency of Pedro Castillo, there were many protests against Castillo, and all of them were organized by the elite. You can visually see how those protests that wanted to oust Castillo were people who were participating were white, while now the protests are the people who participate are indigenous and working class people.
It sounds like the sort of symbolism of having a president, whatever his flaws, that was indigenous and had the backing of a lot of working class people in prison could be quite a strong symbol, I think, in Peru and internationally to what's going on. So I suppose my final question is, what can progressive activists, social movements, trade unionists, etc., here in the UK and internationally be saying and doing on the concerning situation in Peru? And also linked to that, what international governments should be saying or doing, and maybe give us a bit of a flavour about how it's regional governments in Latin America and maybe the US as well are responding to the developments.
Yeah, so first I would like to touch a little bit about Castillo. Pedro Castillo committed many mistakes. One of them is not fulfilling the promises he offered, and he was surrounded by corrupt people with no ideology, without a plan to improve the country. But Pedro Castillo was also a victim of terrible racist acts that show how Peru is, or how in Peru, if you are poor and indigenous, the system will not let you be president or be part of a position in the high spheres of the politics. So now he's arrested, and it's unfair that he's arrested. He was taking his immunity by Congress in a quick way without following the due process, and people are obviously empathizing with him, and they identify with him. Many of these protesters feel betrayed because he didn't fulfill what he promised, but at the same time they see him as a victim of the system. So regarding what people can do abroad, we have to denounce the killings and ask for justice. What is taking place in Peru is a massacre. And it's a massacre by the government and by the security forces. And it's a massacre that, as I said before, the media is not reporting. And fortunately, I would say there are 5 presidents in the region, in Latin America, that are bringing some light to the injustices of what's taking place. Because right now in Peru, the media and the elites are saying that we are living in democracy, that these protesters are terrorists, that these protests are part of the shining path, that these protests are criminals. Well, it's not true. These protests are protesting. These protesters are protesting because they see this as an not legitimate government. And the fact that 5 countries in Latin America have said that they don't recognize Dina Boluarte, the current president of Peru, brings some support to their voices. And yeah, and if you can abroad denounce these killings and bring some attention of what's going on in Peru, people in Peru will be deeply thankful to you, because as I said, Lima creates a bubble in Peru, not reporting what's going on within the working class and indigenous communities. And I have to say that unfortunately, I don't think that this will be solved anytime soon, because as I said, we have a legal system that is not letting people to be responded properly and to be fulfill their demands by the political system. Because despite the fact that the current president have said that we're going to have elections in a year and a half, people want elections now. And the Constitution of Peru blockade that possibility because of many processes that they have to follow. But people are like fed up, and they are like, I don't care what the Constitution says. I want elections now, because I don't believe in the politicians that are running my country now.
Thank you, Francesca. That was really informative and also shows how important the situation is. We certainly offer our international solidarity with the protesters in Peru from Labour Friends of Progressive Latin America, and we look forward to keeping in touch to offer all the solidarity we can. Thank you.